Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me? Looks all right. How's it going? If there's anybody who is new here, I'll give people a little bit of time to start to drip in. But yeah, if anybody's new here, this is a stream that I do every week before a new video comes out. It's only an hour long, but I get to chat to you guys for an hour, and I get to hang out and we get to talk about whatever. Hey, Peter Coffin, welcome to my stream. I see we have Big Seltzer, good Argos Panoptis, Anvil Collective, Diana Pristavu. So we have some of the regulars. So anyways, how's it going, everybody? This is a stream I do in kind of the hour countdown before a new video comes out. It's actually, hey, Andrew Saxon, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to the stream for the first time. That's great. I love when new people come out. Grappling Hooks. Hey, Waldo Hanse von Rensburg, and Craig Morrison and Patrick Stump. All right, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Anyways, hello. So I talked to you guys for an hour. This is kind of like what the whole thing with YouTube Premieres is kind of like. YouTube Premieres is going to allow you to do a live stream before a video comes out. So it's like they took my idea and they integrated it together. And my cat is meowing, so that's fun. All right, so a few areas of business. If you guys haven't watched the channel update video I released on Monday, you really should. I'm making some changes to the way that I structure things, including in the fall setting up a live stream that'll be during like prime time in America, and it'll be like once a week. So that'll be fun. Something to be a little bit more of this, because you guys seem to really, really like it. So I'm going to try to keep it going in some capacity. Also, if you look right here, you'll see a poster that a viewer made for me that is advertising for a new online community. This is for the Step Back Discord server, which got set up earlier. And I'm going to give you guys a link in the chat for that. Yeah, this is the new Step Back Discord server. It had a kind of rough first couple days because, you know, we had to fumigate the trolls, but it seems to be doing pretty well now. So, yeah, that's a whole thing. And Big Seltzer, you seem to like the CCLA stuff that I've been doing. That's really cool. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I'm working on my next video for that right now. So, the Discord server has been pretty fun. I think you guys are going to do really great. So, in the next 57 minutes, I'll be taking down questions and I'll be answering them, and I'll try to get to as many as I can before we run out of time. And then a new video comes out right at the end. And that's how all of this goes down. And yeah, Peter Coffin's here, so that's a fun addition. Okay, so the first question that I have from y'all is, all right, okay, so many questions. Sometime when I'm like legit famous, I'm gonna need to like get somebody to write all these down because it's already so fast. Okay. First question is thoughts on Golden Dawn and Greek neo-fascists. Okay, so we started with fun topics. Golden Dawn. I mean, okay. There's a couple things you can say about it. One, yay! I'm so grateful for finding leftist YouTube. Well, Blake Chastain, you have a lot to catch up on. It's quite a growing thing. So Golden Dawn, a fascist party that has in Greece. So Greece is having some economic technical difficulties, if you guys haven't followed. Basically, there's a long story that has to do with the fact that the European Union, due to the hyperinflation that led to World War II, or at least led to the support of Nazis in Germany, at least that's what the Germans think caused it, because of their worries about hyperinflation, Germany has extremely harsh controls on growing inflation. So they actually, it's something that German bankers especially, but European bankers worry about quite a bit. And Greece joined the European Union And in order to join the European Union, you have to show that you have hello Ace. You have to show that you have some skills at. You have to show that you have skill or certain types of economic things. You have to have an economy of a certain strength in order to get in. And Greece got in a way that a lot of other countries do, which is that you can actually like kind of play with the numbers a little bit in order to make your economy look stronger than it is in order to get into the European Union. And that's basically where things went. So Greece got into the European Union without having really the same economy as like some of the more powerful members of the European Union. And the European Union is a very neoliberal type organization where there are common uses of austerity and relying on the free market for all sorts of things they really shouldn't, like everything. And Greece was on shaky economic footing because it was not really as strong enough as it really wasn't as strong as the economy or as the other members of the European Union. And then the 2008 financial crisis happens. The United States, the center of gravity for finances in America or in the world, has a massive breakdown. We found out that tons of money that we thought was real in the economy turned out to be completely non-existent. It was all speculation because money in speculative markets is completely fabricated. So there was a massive financial collapse, and what people didn't anticipate is that the entire world was extremely invested in the American economy because everyone kept seeing the internet everyone kept just seeing things getting better and better and better and better. And so nobody really anticipated the thing that happens with capitalism all the time, which is that you have booms and busts. And it seems like capitalists are always convinced that this one is the boom that will last forever. So the economy collapsed right as I turned about 19. I was like 19, 20 when the economy collapsed. But Greece was already on shaky footing when that happened. And so when the kind of ripple effects of that got to Europe, Greece went through a huge economic downturn. And when they tried to reach out to the European Union for help, the European Union, because of their strong fear of inflation, because of the way that German banks work, because Germany basically runs the European Union at this point, Germany and France, basically, they imposed really harsh austerity measures. And whenever capitalism really collapses in a big way, the extremes come out of the woodwork. There's the people who have diagnosed what the problems of the world are and try to use this crisis to make the change to a better world, i.e. leftists. The party that really came out of that in Greece was Syriza. But then also there are people who scapegoat any group they can find and use violence in order to use the crisis to get a dictator into power. And that was what Golden Dawn is. And Golden Dawn had the support of a lot of the police. There's like a lot of evidence in Greece that like pretty much all of the police officers are Golden Dawn, or at least a good percentage of them are. And so when it comes to like the unrest that's going on, there's basically Nazi-aligned police officers. And so things were really rough in Greece for a long time. And there was talk of Grexit at one point, of Greece leaving the European Union, and just things got really bad. I have no idea where it went from there, but that's about everything I know about Golden Dawn, which started with the financial collapse of 2008. So, that's a thing. Anyways, neo-fascists showed up in Greece for the same reason neo-fascists are showing up everywhere, and that is capitalism is having another crisis, and people who are in this chaos, people are trying to change the world either to make a world that actually works, i.e. socialists, or people who want to use the internal divisions of the world in order to accelerate capitalism and bring about a dictatorship, which are fascists. And so, it depends upon which side you figure out. So yeah, that's and I do like that the Golden Dawn would always say, "Oh yeah, we're totally not Nazis," but then like their symbol is super duper Nazi. Okay, so yeah, and the thing is that fascism and leftists are starting to show up all over the world and in Greece. And I would really like if the leftists won this time instead of the fascists like last time. My goodness, sorry. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat. He's meowing a whole lot for some reason I don't understand. Here's a question for you. How would the world be impacted if the Cape to Cairo railway was finished in the early 20th century? Oh boy. Okay. Blake Chastain, thank you again. Thanks again, Tristan. You're working so inspired. Thank you, Blake. I really appreciate that. That's really great. All right. So let's talk about this Cape to Cairo railway. Now, I imagine. So in the early 20th century, there was all sorts of capitalist interests that were trying to make railroads, because railroads were a thing that governments were really excited about, and you could show how modern your country was by how many railroads you had built. So oftentimes they were built, and sometimes they were built with like no forethought or process whatsoever. And I'm guessing that there was some sort of mega project to connect South Africa and Egypt, which, given that both were pretty much British domains, and it would have gone through probably Sudan, which was also a British domain at that point, kind of makes sense. I don't exactly know why it didn't happen, but that's a different story. Anyways, sorry, somebody from work tried to message me. So if there was a railroad that went from South Africa all the way to Cairo, what would that look like? I imagine there's a few things you can talk about. One, it'd be super duper expensive. Two, it'd be built through a lot of harsh territory, which would make building a railroad a little difficult, but it could still be done, even with early 20th century technology. Three, it would probably more integrate the British African colonial system together. What I don't know is like what it would have, like the impacts I could see of that are, one, keeping some countries that were more at the periphery of the British Empire in the British Empire, like South Africa and Sudan and Egypt. I'm trying to think about what would be the effect of that, because like it doesn't mean that there would be no third world movement or pushes for independence. So I don't think that the railroad would really protect the British Empire or anything like that. I think what might be more interesting is how, after the movement away from like it would obviously become like a big economic vein of African economics. And if the countries all became independent, I wonder if it would be like, fighting over what would be like, who would have control over this railway. Would have big impacts over like allies and friendships and things like that. But honestly, I'm getting into like parts of African history, like in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s and 70s, that I am very ill-equipped to talk about. But I think it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure what it'd be interesting to see a railway that, because the thing is, in Africa, because of the Great Game, because of the African conquest or the European conquest of Africa, a lot of the railways were designed to just take raw resources and get them out of the continent. And so having one that was internal might help with, developing internally, which I'm not exactly sure. It depends upon how extensive that would be, but I don't know. Also, railways require infrastructure spending to maintain, and I wonder if, not much, but some. And I wonder if things like civil wars and instability would break it at some point. I don't know. Okay. Whew. That was a lot of words. Okay. Let's see. Is it true? Is true communism feasible? And I don't mean Stalin or Mao's version either. All right. So you're talking about like Marx's idea of communism, which is like the end state of economics. So Marx writes about how the economic system, the class inequalities and things like that are like a response to the way that economics works, or the way that our economy works. So like our society is based on our economy. And what Marx would say is that as we moved, once you start unpacking Marx, you realize you have to like do like an entire like several hour discussion in order to explain like one simple thing. But at its core, I think like at the core of everything that Marx believes is that the value of an object, the value of like, say, this camcorder here, is not based on market value. Like market value is a canard. It is simply a construct that we are imposing on things for whatever purpose. But what Marx would say is that a object its value is based on how much time it took for a person laboring, how many labor hours it took for somebody to make it. So like if this camera and like this cup each took 2 hours of work to make, then according to Marx's idea of economics, they would both be worth the same amount. And what Marx saw in the 19th century, if you think about, you have to think, keep in mind, he was a person who lived in the Victorian age. So he's like, he lives in his own time. I think that his ideas are very, like of his time. And are definitely needing to be improved upon and elaborated on and updated, because he was not right about a lot of things, but he was still right about some things. And his framework is strong. And so what he argued is that as we build more and more automated systems, as we get better factories, faster ships, faster everything, the amount of labor used to make a single object goes down over time. And it would approach zero. And basically what futurists, I think, would call the post-scarcity economy. Let me just adjust the camera here a little bit. So we would approach what is called a post-scarcity economy, where pretty much all of the things that people need to live are being produced and easy to get. Problem is, we passed that a long time ago. Because what Marx said is that while our society is sort of this emergent phenomenon that comes out of the economics of the period, it's still a human-based system that adapts in a slower fashion than the economy itself. So like our technology is developing new ways to do things, and our society reflects that to an extent, but we're always like behind. So we're always like a culture that is reflecting an economy that has already passed by. And what Marx would say is that that is moving faster and faster and faster. And so our superstructure, as he called it, is getting more and more behind and getting more out of whack. And what Marx would write is saying, like, when these things get too far out of whack, things get super unstable. And that's when things get too far, things start to collapse. And major revolutions happen. And like Marx wrote that like this is what happened when early capitalism came about and caused the collapse of all of the aristocratic kingdoms that were very like agricultural. Like if you think about the Middle Ages, when the economy is based on agriculture, which is which, agriculture is not really a thing that improves very fast. You basically control land, and the amount of food you produce, basically the amount of wealth you produce, and the amount of wealth you produce is pretty much tied to how much land you have. And so you have this sort of feudal power structure come out of that. But as that starts to break with the invention of like factories and manufactuaries before the Industrial Revolution, where just the idea of bringing a whole bunch of people together to work on one thing, that sort of take hold. Early capitalism started to happen, and the people who were being made rich in that system started to sort of push out the aristocratic system before it. And what Marx said is that as the industrial economy gets more and more powerful, the capitalist system is starting to not work, because capitalism requires people to be able to purchase the things that are being made. But the thing is that the incentives of capitalism are internally contradictory, and one that they're always striving for less and less labor because labor is expensive, but also they require people to have money in order to buy things. And what Marx would say is that there's going to be a point where the economy is so efficient and things are moving so fast that there's no longer a point where people can, there's no more jobs for people to do. And so there's just no ability for people to have the money to buy the things they need. And that's what Marx would say is this point where things just kind of collapse. And Marx would say that was going to happen any time now. But it kind of held on. And then we got past the point where we could fully take care of the human species. Like, I think now we produce 40% more goods than our society uses. And so capitalism's collapse is sticking around, or is getting delayed, and we're not exactly sure why. And Marxist theorists are basically all scratching their heads trying to figure out why has capitalism been so persistent. And there's been various explanations. I'm not exactly sure I have an answer. I think if you have an answer, that you should write a book, because a lot of people will read it. But yeah, that's kind of the thing that like modern day Marxist writers are trying to figure out. And that's why like that's basically been the debate of like modern day. But also there's new things coming up, and that is like letting the natural course of history, in historical materialism take its place. You would need you would end up in this situation where I think that anyways that there's other things that are not just economics that are things that we need to sort of not just let these things go around. Like, for example, climate change. Capitalism, one of the things that Marx didn't write about is that capitalism ruthlessly and relentlessly destroys the ecosystem of the people who use it. And at the moment, with global capitalism being at such a fever pitch, hey, Jenga Tree, that the planet can no longer handle it and has not been able to handle it for a long time. And we are fundamentally collapsing the fundamental life support systems of the planet. And we need to transition away from capitalism in order to not go extinct even faster than I think the natural way to do things. And yeah, it's that kind of economic determinism is very myopic, and it doesn't it lacks a lot of complexity, and it doesn't talk about culture. It doesn't talk about social systems. Marx just kind of like abstracts it all into the superstructure and doesn't really go too much into that. And so I do think that if we're going to fix things, we need to combat in culture, which is difficult. So is true communism feasible? I mean, I think in some ways, on like a long enough scale, I mean, it's feasible in the fact that if we live in a post-scarcity economy, communism is really the only economy that works. It's the only one that makes sense, anyway. But there are can we get to communism without going extinct? Is that a thing that we can do? And that question is still on the table. If you want to go super duper like what's his name, Posadist, you would argue that like this is probably what happens with all sentient life in the universe, and that aliens probably also discover capitalism because of the same economic output, and then they end up going extinct because of capitalism. And like whether or not there's like a whole thing that happens, I'm not exactly sure. But I think it's interesting to think about. It'd be interesting to find out that like if we somehow get past capitalism and get past scarcity and move towards like our Star Trek space future, if we're gonna like go to a bunch of alien worlds and find that like a bunch of species have gone extinct because they couldn't break that loop. They went extinct before they could get rid of capitalism, and I think that'd be really interesting. I do think that this is a area that I need to read a lot more about, and I need to really develop my ideas, because I think a lot of the things I've said are wrong, and I don't exactly know where I am wrong, but I know that smarter people than me that I've talked to have had things to say. I got some beers with Thought Slime last weekend, and he also had issues with what I was saying. So I think that there's interesting things to talk about. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to suss out. All right. Favorite socialist uprising: the Zapatistas, Rojava, Revolutionary Catalonia, Free Territories. Oh, sorry about that. At the moment, I'd probably say it was the Spanish Republicans during the Civil War. I think that their example of like resisting fascism even when they knew they were going to lose and sort of trying to build their society at the same time was rather commendable. I'd be very interested to see where that goes. But I don't have any. I think that the revolutionary Spain, I think, are my favorite socialist. Are my favorite socialist uprising. All right. Would you have been a conscientious objector during World War II? Honestly, I don't know. I can't even, like, the thing is, like, anytime you put me in a hypothetical situation, anybody in a hypothetical situation, they're going to say, like, they're going to say their ideal self, right? They're going to be their ideal self. And I'm not exactly sure. Like, I would think that if I was in World War II, I would try to be an advocate for stopping the war before it starts by trying to contain fascism before it even gets into power. But once it's already, like, once, like, fascists are already going across Europe, once the Holocaust is already happening, there's no question, like, there's no way to not get involved in that. There's no way to, like, to see like Nazism at, like, if I was like, if this is like not a question of like stopping the Nazis before they became like a power, but like fighting in World War II, like, say it's like 1939, I turn 18 right as the war begins. Do you enlist and or get drafted? And honestly, like, when you hear about things like the Holocaust, when you hear about like the war crimes being committed by the Germans and the Japanese, how do you not do it? How do you not? I don't know. I feel like I would probably try to get involved. I can't. I feel like being a conscientious objector to World War II is very different. I would definitely be a conscientious objector to World War I. I think that those two wars were extremely different when it came to like the causes and the things involved. I would not have gotten involved in World War I, but World War II, I don't see any way that you could be a conscientious objector to World War II and then kind of live with yourself afterwards, especially given everything that happened. So that's, I guess, what I would say. All right. You guys are all giving me some really tough questions today. All right, Girthax. What are the pros and cons of nationalism versus globalism? Also, hi, Girthax. I'm trying to think of pros of these things. So nationalism is normally a bad thing. I think that nationalism is way worse than people think it is. It's not. It is, no matter how benign you think it is typically a exclusionary, racist, anti-immigration, pro-imperialism ideology. Even if you just call it patriotism instead of nationalism, it's got no redeeming qualities. The only thing I can think of when it comes to like nationalism as a good thing, and even so, it would only be in like the most minor circumstances, is what I think in the 20th century was called third world nationalism, which was this sort of camaraderie amongst groups of people who had been separated or who had had the shared experience of capitalism, or sorry, of colonialization or colonialism or whatever, colonization. That's the word I was looking for. Just because there were movements that really built out of trying to create a national identity out of one that did not exist because it had been suppressed by colonization, or because before colonization it didn't exist. And it was the rallying cry for successful anti-colonial movements. And I don't know. I think that it's that was the thing. I think that was a case of nationalism where they used it as a rallying call to make positive change for themselves. But I still think that in those cases, there was a lot of downsides. Like, one example that comes to mind is that in Uganda, after the anti-colonial third world nationalist government pushed out the British in Uganda, one of the first things that happened was that the leader of Uganda basically told all of the Indian people, so all the people who had been brought over from India during the British occupation, told them all to leave. They said, "You're all leaving. Everybody, even those who have been here for like several generations, you all have to leave, because Uganda is for Ugandans." And there was this rash of Indian refugees around the world. Like, Canada took a whole bunch of them in the 1970s. And that's an example. Like, even third world nationalism, like, at a certain point, it becomes poisonous. And it eventually it's basically a thinly veiled excuse to limit immigration, and sometimes an even thinner veiled excuse to impose your will on other people and dehumanize people who live in other categories. And I do think that is not good. I don't, Sir Zhao Zhao, I don't think the unification of Germany and Italy were good things. Not really. All right. Grappling hooks. When do you think what do you think is the predicted year for revolution? Oh, geez. That I don't think anybody will be able to. I don't think anybody can predict that. I have no clue. I don't even know if there will be like a global revolution all at once. Okay. Yeah, Diana, you have a point. Like, people didn't really know that much about the Holocaust before World War II. And yet, I do think that if it was a case where like World War II was just starting and I was completely ignorant of what was going on, like with the Holocaust and everything like that, and everybody was just anti-Semitic everywhere, maybe I'd be more of a objector. But like there was a point where people did know at a certain point that there was going to be like people knew. Like there's a lot of people who like to say that they didn't know about the Holocaust, but at a certain point they knew, and them saying they didn't know is them trying to get themselves to sleep at night. Alrighty. So let's see. Hey, Fedor, welcome to the channel, or welcome to the stream. All right. Thoughts on Edward Gibbons and the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire? I don't exactly know. I don't know that much about this, so I can't really say much. Okay. Comrade Ace wants to know what the video today is about. Today's video is going to be a technology history of guns. So one of the things that I've done that I did when I was a working historian is that I was a technology historian, and I also was in science and technology studies. And so this video that comes out today is about guns and like the development of firearms as a technology and its spread throughout the world and developments. And I use it to sort of talk about how we develop technology and how technology evolves over time. Like what are the factors? And it comes around to a very interesting question at the end. Okay. 255 AD. Let's see. 255 AD wants to know, suppose you and 999 other communists were allowed to set up a colony on another planet. Do you think that you'd just be able to create a civilization that stay socially or just indefinitely? Okay, let me just unparse this. Let me parse out this question. Suppose you and a bunch of other communists were allowed to set up a colony on another planet. Do you think you'd be able to create a civilization that stays socially just indefinitely? I mean, there's a lot of factors that have to do with like the material conditions, but just say it was like another Earth. Like, I do think that starting a society under communist principles would not be too difficult, especially if we just like started from scratch. I know that I feel like a couple things today have like revealed me as being weirdly posadist, but I'm not. But starting from scratch, I do think that we could, especially with like a community of like 1,000 people, you could totally. Capitalism doesn't like the capitalist mode of distributing resources is so antithetical to like how people do it at like the level of like friends and family. Like the idea that if like, you know, you had 5 apples and 5 people and decide to give like 5 of them or 4 of them to one person and then have 4 of them split one is like so alien to our minds. But yet when we do it with like the money, the world's like resources, that seems to make sense to us. So like, I do think that there would be, I think that that's interesting, or I do think that if you organized under like personal things and you kept things like under a more community focusing, I think you'd end up with some interesting stuff. Okay. Sondar 12, what do you think of people like Bannon, that Bannon can actually have an impact on Europe? His white nationalism doesn't fit with the standard European far right. Yeah, I do think that this is another thing about fascism that we don't really talk about too much, and that is fascism is very unique to the culture that creates it. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, this isn't fascism because it's not like Germany. This isn't fascism because it's not like Germany. This isn't fascism because it's not like Germany. But like, really, fascism will emerge in different ways in different cultures. Fascism in Canada will probably arise by saying that we have been giving people a free ride for too long with all of our nice social services, and we need to be more protective over them and use it to exclude people. In America, it will be about killing people and excluding people in order to defend our freedoms and whatever. Like, fascism will use whatever it needs to, and Steve Bannon's fascism works perfectly for the United States, and yeah, it doesn't work in Europe. But Europeans have their own fascism. Their own fascism grows in its own way. It's like fascists in different contexts will be very different types of people, or at least say very different types of things. Blake Chastain, what are your thoughts on Chomsky's manufacturing consent and the propaganda model of modern mass media and advertising? As I've read parts of that book. I've read parts of that book, and I think it's pretty good. It's a little old. It's a little like the idea of the propaganda model of mass media like makes sense if it's like the 1980s and everybody is worried about the development of like cable television and national like networks and things like that, because that's like a newer thing in the 80s. But today, the propaganda model of mass media is sort of breaking in interesting ways, and I think that the internet kind of like Chomsky in the 80s was worried about the having one voice controlling the message, having the one or the three news networks that determine what everybody thinks. And at the moment, that has kind of fallen apart and it's kind of fractured. And now the main issue is people self-radicalizing down holes and kind of forgetting how to participate in a social society because they can just exclude everybody who is different from them. And you end up with like these like radical racist groups as a result. And I do think that there's a different model that needs to be developed, because I think it might have made sense in a previous time, but I think custom reality in you kind of fits into that as like an idea of a follow-up to the propaganda model of mass media, because the mass media it's a theory for a time in a past, and I think that you could talk about it in a historical context of media theory and media history as like. In the 80s and 90s, you had the United States use like mass media and control over like propaganda, like over the news media, to waltz itself into wars of imperial conquest without a whole lot of problems. The propaganda model of mass media is sort of what caused Vietnam syndrome to die. And so I think that media historians will talk about how the age of the mass media, the age of the cable news network, will be when we, the like Kuwait, the invasion of Iraq, and the war on terror and things like that happened. But I think that sort of broke down over the last decade or so. Yeah. Diana Pristavu wants to know what I think about brocialism. Well, socialists are still products of the modern age, and there are tons of socialists who are extremely homophobic, racist, sexist, transphobic, everything you name it. There was a whole fight over. There was a whole fight in my Discord the other day because somebody was talking about how they were a pro-Brexit, anti-immigration socialist in the UK. And it was like, what? Who is this person? Yeah. And I do think that some will use like class reductionism as a way to dismiss issues that are very important. And I really wish that wasn't the case. And a lot of them, brocialists are sexist socialists. I think that in some ways they are like it sort of ignores their own they're sort of missing out on a large part of their own ideology and not applying it to other people. But still, Wholesome Punk, you finally caught one of these streams. Congratulations. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. So yeah, I think that there was a lot more of a... I think that without intersectional discussions and without, you know, a firm understanding and embracing of IDPol, you're not really that socialist. And in many ways, there are people who say they're socialists who embrace a lot of right-wing, like, reactionary opinions. I think that that is a problem that we need to address. I'm not exactly sure how you address it, but, you know, there you are. Yeah, Lefty Poll is a good example of like the kind of shitty leftists that we really don't need in our movement. What is class reductionism? Class reductionism is when you reduce all of the social inequalities in the world to just being class, i.e., it's a way to use Marxist language to dismiss like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and things like that. And the magical thinking that if you just got rid of capitalism, all these things would just disappear. Walto Hanse von Renberg wants to know, Tristan, do you like to travel, and if so, which countries do you want to visit? Right now, I love traveling. I have traveled all over the United States and most of Canada. I would really like to go to India. I think that's a place that I've been really wanting to go for a long time. I'd probably really like to go to Saudi Arabia to see some cool stuff. And I would really like to go to Seoul in South Korea. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff to see there. And I would like to go to France again. I haven't been to France in over a decade, and I would really like to visit a lot more things. And so I think that would be a good thing to do. All right. Tristan, come to Sweden. I would love to go to Sweden. Sweden would be fun. All right. Should Argos Panoptis wants to know if they should make a book review channel? Sure, why not? All right. Aren't futurists very right-wing? Actually, a lot of futurists are right-wing, and I don't really like a lot of... there's a lot of futurists that I really don't agree with on a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that we should be like anti-future or not discuss things. What cool things do you want to see in Saudi Arabia? In Saudi Arabia, I want to see Mecca and Medina mostly, the like two most important cities, holiest cities in Islam. I know there's some parts of Mecca especially that I would not be able to go to because I'm not a Muslim, but there's a lot of really cool like temples and huge mosques that I would really love to see. And some of the most beautiful madrasas in the world are in Saudi Arabia. Luke Lee, what about the great documentary They Live, which is about an alien capitalists that are trying to strip the world of its natural resources? Yeah, I actually had an idea for a science fiction novel at one point that was going to be about humanity if like we found some like cheap and easy way to make energy and move faster than light that didn't require us to get over capitalism, and humanity basically becomes this horrible dark empire that is conquering other people and just like really oppressive, and everybody's opposing them. But I never really wrote that. Maybe someday. At the moment, writing a book seems so beyond my capabilities, especially fiction. Which country do you think fascism will become fascist first? Probably the United States, honestly. There are some countries that have flimsier like social structures or flimsier government structures that will fall apart maybe easier, but the United States has always been flirting with fascism its entire like existence. So I think that the United States needs like one good push to just completely collapse. If I can write a book. Yeah, Peter Coffin. All right, so Peter Coffin, you wrote a book. You wrote a book like while you had just had like a baby. like you had just had your second child, and your first child's still like a kid, and yet somehow you wrote a book. I think you once answered a Curious Cat about it, where you said that like you wrote your book on your phone while you were like staying up with like your newborn, and I was like, holy crap, that is intense. Michael Collins, would Poland ceding Danzig have stopped the war? No, I don't think fascism would have been very. I don't think fascism would have worked very well. Yeah, Hytham or something. Arias Rocksmith or Rocksmith 2014. I'm a little confused on that one. I'm sorry. I don't know much. I don't know what you're talking about with Rocksmith. And we're 10 minutes left. I know. They Live is like the one with the glasses where you see the ideology. It's the obey thing. It's the what's it called? It's a movie that that Slavoj Žižek talks about in The Pervert's Guide to Ideology a lot. Jay Bristow, do you think the EU will collapse? I think that it has a lot of strain that it really needs to work out. I think that it's not. It will collapse if it doesn't change, but I hope it changes because I'd rather a European Union that has altered itself into a better form than one that has collapsed, because Europe without a unifying force will not last long. Jay Bristow again, do you think that automation will create an economic collapse? Yes. I think that if we don't address the major issues of automation, it's going to cause a economic collapse as massive amounts of unemployment happen and we have no structures in place to handle it. And keep in mind, people are always 3 missed meals away from a revolution. I think that that's like a historical truism that people should really keep in mind. Diana Pristavu, what do you think about the paradox of tolerance? I don't know what this is exactly. I don't know exactly what you're referring to. If you could tell me, if this is like the being tolerant to the intolerant, yeah, that's not a thing. I think that that's not a paradox. I don't think that it's not paradoxical. It's like you don't practice tolerance to the intolerant. That's not a thing. That's like calling bald a hair color. All right, Geshen, thoughts on a one-state solution for Israel-Palestine if we must have states? If we must have states, a one-state solution would be the only one that would be equitable for both Palestinians, for Palestinians. Israelis will, in a two-state solution, the Israelis are going to get away with the best deal. So really, what if the best solution that does require states would be a one-state solution that is secular and based on an equitable exchange of political power and goods, and not, slowly strangling a people out of existence. Only Bro 555, do you have any thoughts on Euroscepticism? I haven't heard of like a Euroscepticism from the left that makes any sense to me. Like if it's just like, yeah, the European Union is a neoliberal system that is bad, so we should leave, but like in doing so, you'd be breaking up like the total thing about like honestly, I don't see a strong left-wing argument. In many ways, every time I met like a left-wing Eurosceptic, it's usually because even though they call themselves left-wing, they have like secret like right-wing reactionary opinions that they're just not talking about. All right. Only Bro 555 thought. Oh, sorry. 255 AD. The other day, you said you live on Native American land. Do you think that the land Toronto is built on should be given back to the tribes it was taken from? I do think that that attempt to undo and discuss the reconciliation to be make with the indigenous peoples who used to live here is extremely difficult, because they're still here. They still live in places now. They have new places that are their home, I think that it's important to acknowledge that you live on indigenous territory that was stolen, but to just like give back the continent would not really work out well for anybody involved. But what I think it does mean is that the indigenous people of this territory, of this land, should have the right to, you know, drinkable water and decent living standard. I think that that's like the least that we could do as part of reconciliation. Because honestly, like, there's no making even with the crimes of the past. There's no, this isn't capitalism. Like, history is not capitalist. You can't just like pay enough money so that, or give people stuff until that you've made things square. You really, like, there's no taking back that the Canadians committed genocide. There's no taking back that residential schools happened. And so we'd have to find a way to, come to some sort of way for us to live together. It's already happened. And I don't know exactly what the answer to that is, but I know that it's a long process and we are definitely not doing enough. Most indigenous people are not like, give us back the entire continent. Most indigenous people are like, can you please not poison our water and like, you know, like make us have to boil, like, we like, you know, being able to go to school and having electricity and potable water. All right, Radical Reviewer. Does the first world have revolutionary potential? Maybe in a longer term. I have no idea. Things are in a lot of flux right now. But you know. All right. All right. We are quickly running out of time. So 25580, your question about opening arguments is going to be my last one on the list. I can't do any more. I'm done. Hey, the girl that's been noticed. How's it going? Could the USSR avoid collapse? Yes, I think that the USSR had issues that also had to deal, also are very similar to the European Union's issues, which are that they're too rigid in a firm ideology that is far, far out of date. And they really needed to make massive reforms that would make them feel uncomfortable because they're like locked in this extremely inflexible system, and they would really need to change things to get people to stay around. I do think that the USSR caused its own downfall by conquering countries like Lithuania and Estonia and stuff like that, and keeping a bunch of countries under their thumb. And I do think that they would have needed to transition to a more equitable relationship between the different SSRs. And the Soviet Union would have needed to sort of up the glasnost and perestroika stuff. Because I think that they really needed to show, like, they needed to, at the same time, get rid of their old system, but also show that there is a positive side to the, like, they had to show themselves as an alternative to capitalism in a good way. And the old state capitalist model that the Soviet Union had been focused on was just no longer able to function. It was just too outdated, and it was stuck. Gorbachev did massive reforms, yes, but it didn't go super great. Do you think British fascism would be about imperialist nostalgia? I think it already is about imperialist nostalgia. I think that, like, the Brexit movement about, like, saying that I think the Brexit movement being all like, you know, you need to, Britain needs to be independent, all that kind of stuff is sort of imperialist nostalgia. Sir Zhao Zhao, are brocialists sexist socialists? Yes. Wolframium, checking alternate history of Twitter is pretty obvious. He's a Republican boy. Do you have a discussion about politics with Cody? Yeah, we've talked about politics a lot. We fight about things sometimes, but him and I come at each other from a position of mutual respect in that, not that we respect each other's like positions on things in any way whatsoever, but we've come to a position that, you know, we do the show together. We have a lot of people that you know, are interested in both of our content. We're friends. Like, we personally get along very well, and so we know that, like, we're not going to come to agreement on politics. It's just like not going to happen. I think his politics comes from a place that he has a very dismal view of humanity, which makes me sad more than it makes me angry. And I think that that's like it's an impasse that we know about, and it's not a thing that we use to sort of tear ourselves apart, because I think that we have a good relationship going for a lot of things. And also, he's not a Nazi, which is good. If he was a Nazi, it would be a completely different story, but he's not. He's just a, he's just a conservative that, if I didn't talk to conservatives, there'd be problems. I would not have many, you'd not have many friends. Why can't you enter some parts of America if you're not Mecca if you're not a Muslim? It has to do with their rituals and places that they determine to be sacred. It's just a thing. It's a thing in, it's their religion, whatever. If they don't want non-Muslims to go somewhere, then, don't let not Muslims go somewhere. That's fine. It's their religious thing. Jenga Tree, how would you get a billionaire to spread out their wealth to as many people as possible? I don't really see any way of doing that in a way that they would agree with. You really have to kind of coercively take their money away. All right. D-Quack, will the So That Happened podcast return? I hope so. Cody's still working on his book. I imagine once his book is done that we can probably talk about it. Will the U.S. get an effective liberal president yet, like Clinton after Bush, Obama after Bush? I hope so. That would be definitely an upgrade. I'm definitely not an accelerationist. Social Security, is Social Security be expanded to everyone? Is that a proper implementation of UBI? I don't know. I feel like the second that we're reliant on the state to provide our well-being, while better than relying on corporations to create our well-being, it's still at the whims of powerful people with of billionaires with interests. I do think that the second that we get UBI is the second that it stays stagnant for multiple years and doesn't adjust with inflation, and it gets worse. I think it's a stopgap measure, but it's not like a solution. Hey, Tristan, do you think that, what do you know about Belgium's Wallonian Revolution, ultimately known as the Silent Catalonia? I don't know anything about it. Guilty Pleasure YouTube channel. Guilty Pleasure YouTube channel. You Suck at Cooking. That's my Guilty Pleasure YouTube channel. And do you listen to Opening Arguments 255 AD? No, I do not. All right. I went a little bit over. But yeah, a new video has been born. I'm going to go and get the link for you guys, and then I'm going to close down. I'm really sorry for the people whose questions I couldn't get to. I tried to get to as many as possible, and my throat is already dying. I'm so sorry. So I'm going to get you guys the link live now. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Enjoy the video, like, share, subscribe. I hope you have a really good time, and I hope that you guys have a great week. And I'll see you guys on Thursday. Bye.